We're going to be recording. So, good evening, everyone. We got some new faces, so I'd like to welcome you guys. First time here in our group. Okay, as I mentioned to you guys, on Tuesdays we do the gospel according to the Spiritism. We do the study, and at least once a month, sometimes twice a month, we do a talk where someone here from the group prepares a presentation and talk about a specific topic. It varies. That's when we get a little bit different from what we've been studying sequence. So, for tonight's talk, I chose this topic here, to not judge. Why did I do that? Let's start. This is the first talk by someone from the group this year, the year of 2020. This week we had the February 2nd, 2020. It's not going to happen for another century or so that we have a, I don't know the name in English, Portuguese is Capicua, that, back and forth is the same thing. That shows it's going to be a very special year. This is a great year for us to take our resolutions and put them into practice. Every year here in the United States, you don't enter a new year without resolution. So we live here, so we always think about our resolutions, right? So that's a great thing that we slice time that can always have a fresh start. Somehow it feels fresh. I'm still on the same job, live in the same house, but somehow when the year starts, we feel that energy to start fresh, not to start all over, but okay, it's a new beginning. So it's just like when we wake up, then you have a long day, the rest of the year, you go to sleep, and then you wake up fresh. That's how I feel in the beginning of the year. So let's think about how we can put in practice some of these resolutions, some of the experience, something that I've been reading. Usually, February 12th is the day where everybody broke already their resolutions, all of them. If you decided to lose weight, that's when your diet goes south because it's right after Super Bowl usually, right? If you decided to start exercising, that's when you got tired and all your muscles are in pain. That's when I'm not gonna take a break, and a break lasts another year, right? Just saying that because we gotta be realistic. We gotta take baby steps. First, we're gonna crawl, then walk, then we can run. So we have to do one thing at a time with realistic goals. One very interesting suggestion that I once received is okay, what if we include on our resolution the teachings that you know that they are important, but you have a hard time putting them into practice, making that happen? And I thought, that's a good idea. But just like everything else, I would fail February 12th, whatever I have decided, unless we put realistic goals. So, since, when I heard that suggestion, I try to do one teaching at a time. This year is this very difficult challenge to learn about judging others. And there's a lot of literature, Spiritist literature, Christian literature about that because it's too hard. It's too hard. We live in society. We judge our brother. We judge our sister, even if we don't want to. Imagine people that we don't have any connection. And in a way, they're bothering us. It can be on anything. But why shouldn't we judge? That's what we're going to be studying here tonight. We will never judge, not even on the legal system. That's what we're going to study tonight, right? Let's just think about the example, our biggest example, our model and teacher. That's with him that we're going to be learning tonight, okay? So, one teaching at a time. This year, let me see how far I can go with the don't judge option. It has to be realistic. If I think that by the end of the year I'm not judging, that's wrong. And the end of maybe 100 reincarnations, if I make a big effort, maybe we'll achieve that because while we are here in this planet, that means we are imperfect. We're students, we are learning, right? But we have to have a goal. You don't get to law school as a lawyer. You get there to learn. At the end of a lot of work, a lot of nights of study and tests, you become at the end a lawyer. If you want to become a medical doctor, 8 years plus residence, you don't start the school ready for that. No, you start ready to start. So here on this planet, we came here ready to start learning all these things. So again, realistic goals. We want to be to the point of several spirits very evolved, already born in this planet, that they don't feel the need. They already know that they will not judge. Right now, the effort is, even though I want to, I will hold back. At least I will not say. Baby steps. That's crawling. Next time, maybe some things that I was thinking but did not say, I'm not thinking anymore because I did not put that out. And that's for everything. But we are using this one first, right? So there is a very interesting concept that is we have to understand that if for me now it's time to choose this goal, I cannot go to the others and tell everybody, you should be doing that. No, we gotta learn. People here that know me for quite some time may know my diet preferences, or as people put, lifestyle. I'm vegan, right? And some people, oh, that's congratulations. Not quite. Other people say, but why? The same thing. Not quite. Don't judge. The same way, whatever reasons I had to make that choice, doesn't mean that everybody has to have the same reason and everybody has to make the same choice and have to think the same way. My time to make that decision was now. The same way about being spiritist. We all here, we know about spiritism. It touches our heart. It makes sense for us. For me, that's the only thing that I never changed in my life. I was born in a family that is a spiritist. I'm spiritist to this day. Other things I changed, soccer team or country I moved, you know. But no, spiritism is the one thing that always made sense to me. Does this mean that I'm gonna go to everybody, preach and convince them you gotta do that? No, right? So we pick our goals, we try to get better on something, respecting every time's time, right? So when I was preparing for this talk, I was watching a talk by a Brazilian, very well-known public spiritist speaker called Haroldo Dutra Dias, and he mentioned a book by Malcolm Gladwell. It's called The Outliers. So this book develops a theory called the 10,000 hours rule. Here's a very simple definition of that. According to this gentleman here, you only become really good at something if you practice for 10,000 hours. It's very easy to understand. I like to play guitar, and I know that if I don't practice, my mind may want to do something, my fingers will not get there. We know that if we want to practice a sport, we want to run. If we don't run for several hours, we will not get our body conditioned enough to do that. Think about airplanes. You get to an airplane, and then someone's gonna say, "Oh, welcome everybody to this flight from Austin to Alaska. I will introduce the new pilot. That's gonna be his second flight." What do you feel, right? If they say, "No, there is this pilot here that has 10,000 hours of flight," oh, then you trust, right? But the one that's on the second flight will get there eventually, right? But the one that already has 10,000 hours already made it. So he only got there because he went one by one, counting one by one of these hours. So we can do the same. We as spiritists, we know that we got a guide and model to follow, which is Jesus. Jesus is not was not on his first incarnation at all. He didn't even need to incarnate for a long time. According to what the Spirit teaches, Jesus has been with us since when the planet was designed and formed. Think about this. How old is Earth? Around 6 billion years. So that spirit, a Christic spirit from the most elevated order of spirits, was born here among us and brought us some teachings. Imagine how many hours of flight he has of perfecting. So that's a good example to follow. And that's what we're going to be analyzing and learning today. So a little bit about do not judge. So there's a very simple teaching here. On the Gospel according to Spiritism, the chapter 10 is called Blessed are the Merciful. And there are several examples about what is being merciful. This is the item number 11. The teaching for Christ on the Gospel according to Matthew was very simple. Do not judge, or you will too be judged. So we will not judge at all? No. Just be ready for that. To be able to judge, you have to have the moral authority to not be guilty, to be judged for the same thing that you're judging the other one. Let's think about that. The same way that you judge others, you'll be judged, and the measure you use will be measured to you. So when you think about the legal systems, do judges go to jail? It's hard, right? It's exception. They do go every now and then. But they learn enough the laws to not break them. And if they do, well, they knew that they were breaking the law, so they should, because there is a thing to be judged, the other things to be condemned, sentenced, right? So we have to think where we want to be there. So I made a quick collection of Emmanuel. Who is Emmanuel? He's a spirit that wrote hundreds of books channeled through a medium called Francisco Cândido Xavier. In Brazil, we just call Chico Xavier. In English, we pronounce it Chico Xavier. Okay? So that spirit of Emmanuel had several incarnations. For instance, 2,000 years ago, he was a Roman senator that sat on a meeting with Pontius Pilatus, don't know how to pronounce that in English, saying, what do we do with this Jewish guy from Galilee that everybody wants to kill? Well, just arrest him. No, I'm not sure that that's right. So that was the spirit of Emmanuel. And then he reincarnated several times throughout time. One of them, he reincarnated on the biggest hospital of this planet, the land of the gospel, the heart of the road, Brazil, and helped to found a new country as Manuel da Nóbrega. Since then, as a spirit, he channeled several teachings for us through that medium. Only about do not judge, we're gonna find different books with different texts. The first one here, we can build a Christian conscience, and we're gonna see which path of Jesus it shows us that by learning to stay quiet, by learning not only what to do, but what not to do and what not to say, when we should just stay silent. The other one is instead of judging, we should learn how to teach that person that we think is doing something wrong. It's not do, how are you gonna do that? Think about how difficult that's gonna be without hurting that person's feeling, without being arrogant. That's a big challenge. But that's how we grow with the challenges. So this is on a book that's not translated in English. So the name is in Portuguese. This other text here is on a Spiritist paper they used to publish every, I don't know, every 2 months or so. The Reformer, if I translate that. And then on a book that I also didn't see, Words of Eternal Life, I don't think this book's translated to English as well, which is the capability of differentiating. Here, we have the example of if you can differentiate what is good and what is bad, you already know what is good and bad. If you can see something good and something bad, that means that you already learned how to differentiate that. The next step is if you are given the opportunity to correct, you should do that because you're already on that phase, on that stage where you're becoming an instrument from the divinity to help correcting it. So as we grow, we learn how to differentiate it. We grow more, we learn how to see what a certain brother or sister is doing that we would be judging, and in which way can we help correct the path of that person. Remember, everybody has their free will. We will not be able to fix the error, right? But we can help that person find the right way. The next one is Jesus told us to do not judge, but didn't tell us do not self judge. Before we can look on someone else's blank, we have to see what we have on our eye, right? So actually, this is a very difficult exercise that we have to learn to look inside and be fair to ourselves. Because if we can judge ourselves with fairness, we are practicing to be able to help others as well. If we know that we are not good on something, again, we have to be extremely fair to the self judgment. Otherwise, you're going to either pull us down or you're going to be unrealistic, think that we are perfect. Neither way, we are not helping ourselves at all. We have to find a way to review our ideas, to review our thoughts, our attitudes. And the two feelings that are going to help us with that: tolerance and humanity. If we base our growth on these two tools, everything else follows through: tolerance and humanity. The next one is the self defense and self protection. How come this makes sense? This is from a book called Safe Adulterous, also not translated yet to English. This is from a collection that's we have only 4 books translated in English, but it's over 50 books of messages that Emmanuel brought to Chico Xavier during public meetings. So either opening or closing, they took note, they collected all of them, and they compiled into different books. Some of them we have access, some others they are only in Portuguese. They brought together over 400 books, so it's a lot of book. Where do not judge comes and help us in self-defense. This is simple. As you don't judge someone and you decide to help that individual, you're avoiding creating a new enemy. Think, okay, here in Spiritism, we know that thoughts are things. As I think of something, most of us at least, we don't see people's auras. But we have this spirit that was incarnated, Francisco Xavier, that could see almost the entire spiritual road. He even told us a story that once someone came, approached it, and he gave them money. Oh, you did that for charity? Oh, no, no. I could see the energy of that guy. If I didn't give them money for that guy, he was having so many bad thoughts, it would give me a headache. So I just bought myself some peace. So he didn't give money out of charity. He gave the money out of self-defense. So in a way, we could do the same thing, right? When you have a chance to not create a new enemy, and again, the spiritists, they always teach us to be meek. If you're going to talk to someone, be calm. Of course, you cannot be calm with a bow. It's if a lion. Otherwise, you die. There are some spirits that are in different levels. So some spirits may need more energetic attitudes, but our planet is evolving more and more. We are in a way that we can talk to each other without needing to be that aggressive. So if we have the chance, the opportunity, without spoiling anyone's opportunities, without uh, making the mistake of limiting their free will, it's going to be for our own good if we help that person take the right path. Okay? So for this, several of us here, we have this book called O Consolador, also not translated to English yet, The Counselor, where we have this question in English. And the question, we're going to see another slide about that, but the question is quite simple. So when we have the law of the man, when we have a criminal process, a criminal lawsuit, should we sentence that person according to, whatever the human law is, or should we always deem them innocent because Jesus told us you should not judge, right? So the answer is here, but we're going to talk about that pretty soon. But here's a quick collection. There is more. Here's only what I could fit in one slide. There's at least 12 books that Emmanuel only talks about that. So before I move to the next topic, a quick discussion about miracles. So to Spiritism, we have a specific book called Genesis that explains on the Spiritist view about miracles. Miracles, let's get an example. If you go to a very remote population that never had contact with the outside world and start showing some things that we have here, all the way from an airplane flying to making phone calls to the other side of the road, they don't know how that works. They're going to say that that's a miracle. Miracle, by definition, is anything that you cannot explain that seems to be supernatural. Seriously, think about this. 200 years ago, I would get my cell phone today and call wirelessly without any wire. They're not seeing my voice traveling. So they'll say, oh, I don't believe it. Right? Electricity. Can you see electricity? No, you can see the fire that it produces. You can see, it burning atoms. You can see it, but you cannot see electricity running around. And electricity is making everything that is happening here. So if you don't believe in electricity, it's just like you don't believe in gravity. It's just that we are still learning about a lot of things. So for people 200 years ago, electricity would be a miracle, right? Now we know that it is not. So a lot of things that we deem supernatural, no, they have an explanation. And that's the same thing with every single miracle that we ever present. So let's think about some different miracles that we heard about. Jesus turned water into wine. Jesus walked into water. Jesus healed the sick. Those about healing the sick, we know that a lot of other spirits, they do that too, right? Even these days, we have a lot of spirits that they have this power of healing, right? So no miracle there. According to Spiritism, there's an explanation. Some of them, the spirits already gave us. Several other ones, the spirits told us, you will not understand. You're not there yet. Your language is not rich enough to have the words that we need to explain what's happening when you're doing this. But there's an explanation. It's not just a miracle, right? So I'm going to talk about another miracle that Jesus performed. The first stone, the theme of today's talk. Is anyone here not familiar with the story of the woman that got caught into adultery and then was brought to Jesus? Anyone here not familiar with that story? I guess everybody heard this, right? So the topic of this talk today is cast the first stone, the ones who are free of sin. And that's what we're going to discuss on the next minutes here. Okay? So the story behind that is this. Jesus was teaching at the temple. It starts like this. This is on the Gospel of John. That's the first interesting thing. There are four Gospels, official, that tells the story of Jesus. Three of them are very similar because they have the same source. John is the one that is different than the other ones for several reasons. It was written almost 80 years after the other ones. He wrote by himself, isolated, with everything that he saw from Jesus. The other ones, if you think, Gospel of Luke, Gospel of Mark, neither one of them ever saw Jesus. They were not apostles. They have this is a little bit of history. Matthew, we have a Gospel of Matthew. Yes, Matthew saw Jesus, and Matthew was always taking notes. So everybody that Luke everything that Luke and Mark learned, they learned because Matthew took notes, and then Paul read all those notes and was preaching, and they were taking notes of Paul. John, no, John saw Jesus and believed all that. So everything that John wrote is because he believed all that. So then, John tells us this: Jesus was teaching at the temple, and then the teachers of the law and the Pharisees, that is to this day with the Jewish people, they take religion, it's so important for them, it's so serious for them, that if you decide to become a doctor of the law or teacher of the law, that's your profession for the entire life. Of course, not the law of the United States Constitution. It's the Jewish code based on the Torah, based on the first five books of the Old Testament, right? So they brought a woman caught in adultery. Did they brought the couple? No, right? How many people you need to have an adultery? Three, actually, right? You need the two that were committing adultery and the one that was being cheated. At least three, right? No, they brought the woman. They made her stand before the group and they told to Jesus, Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. And then they told Jesus that, again, Jesus has at least 6 billion years on earth only, on earth alone, right? In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such woman. Now, what do you say? So they were testing Jesus, right? And it's on the gospel. They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis of accusing him. So they were trying to get Jesus, right? So here's a miracle. What did Jesus do? I'll be right there. What did Jesus do? He just looked down and started writing. Come on, anyone here, if you bring a woman and say that, the first thing I do, really? With whom? What she do? I know it was that guy that she was. I'm sure that I knew. Or even if you try not to say something, you're gonna think of something. Jesus did something that is almost impossible for us on this stage of evolution that we are. When they brought, he respected that woman's intimacy. He has nothing to do with that woman's sexual life. He just looked, not interested, started writing. That's something incredible and really hard to do. But let's take a look. This is what the gospel says. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such woman. Okay, doing some research, I found which part of the law they were referring to. So, there are five books that the Jewish people base their law on. One of them is this Deuteronomy. I don't know how to pronounce that. The other is Numbers, there is Exodus, right? So, one of them is this. The other one, I cannot pronounce the name as well. So, let's read what that book says. If a man is found sleeping with another man's wife, both the man who slept with her and the woman must die. You must purge the evil from Israel. That's the law. Did they bring the man? Those are teachers of the law. They were supposed to know better. They brought the woman. So, yes, that's what men do. since forever, right? So as we grow, as we evolve, this has to change, right? Because we still do that to this day, all right? I watched a presentation from a company. They were talking about diversity and how their company is inclusive, and it was the entire board of directors, all white male. Okay, honest, one white female, one, eight white male. Yes. Let's talk about inclusion. Seriously, look in a mirror. We're gonna get there. But back then, humanity was so behind to 2,000 years ago that they did this. They brought this. And there is something else. Just to think, I even did an entire talk about the Spiritist view of the Bible. First thing, if you go to the previous slide, they said that in the law, Moses condemned. So, who was Moses? He was born, according to history, he was born in Egypt, but from Jewish people, he was raised to become, a prince of Egypt. He found out he was Jewish. He decided to free his Jewish from captivity in Egypt. So he freed his people. There were a lot of things that happened. And then he guided the Jewish people from Egypt to the promised land, the land of Canaan. Don't know how to pronounce that in English. It took them 40 years to get there. If you look on Google Maps, it takes you maybe 1 week to walk from Egypt to Israel. So 40 years, there was a reason why that happened. Okay? One of the reasons is because during that time, Moses was also educating that people that was extremely, extremely primitive. When Moses went up to the mountain and stayed there time enough, just long enough to get the Ten Commandments, as soon as he came down, they were already adoring a statue of a goat. So that's how primitive they were. So they needed discipline. So Moses himself, think about doing 40 years in the desert. You think that Moses had enough paper or any material to write 5 books? No. Again, the Spiritist view is that there is a symbolism in all that. You cannot take this as history literal by word. Okay? Those laws are attributed to Moses as the founder of the Jewish religion, okay, as the father of the Israeli people. But these laws here, if you read this book here, you're going to see that women are not supposed to have haircuts. And you're going to even explain how you wash your hands. So, again, they're not giving only the moral teachings on those books. They're teaching, and they have also the legal system for that people. Okay? So, on that legal system, they said that they had written that if a man happens to meet at a town a virgin pledged to be married and sleeps with her, you shall take both of them to the gates of that town and stone her to death. The young woman, because she was in a town and did not scream for help. Seriously? She got kidnapped, wasn't saved, she's gonna be stoned to death. And the man, because he violated another man's wife, he must purge the evil. So when Jesus faced this kind of teachings, and he knew very well what they were talking about, what did Jesus do? Bow down and start writing. If it's me and I know this, I'm gonna be screaming like this. And where is the guy? Why only the woman? But Jesus, no, he started writing, right? If I was defensive and combative with them, we would just be fighting, just like they were. They brought them to create conflict, and I would, eat the bait and go there, right? So Jesus was just writing. Okay, I'm gonna skip a couple of slides here, just because I want to get in this part here. Okay, so Jesus bent down and started writing on the ground with his finger, and then what they did, they kept questioning Jesus. They kept asking him, "What do we do?" Oh, You want to know what you do? Here comes 10,000 hours of flight, or 10 billion hours of flight. Jesus was there, writing. Here's another interesting aspect of this. Does anybody know how many things written by Jesus are there? Did Jesus write any of the Gospels? Is there any letter written by Jesus? No. Jesus had universal teachings that are not only good for humanity in this planet, those are divine laws applicable for the entire universe. Which language would Jesus write? Something that is so universal that would be true here, Jupiter, everybody where we have more than one individual. And God wants us because you need two to make one. So when you are born, there's already a family. There are at least three there. So we have to learn to respect each other, right? So what was Jesus writing there that not a single apostle wrote? This is what Jesus wrote. No, they all said what Jesus said, what Jesus taught, but there's a symbolism, very important there, right? So one of the reasons the Spiritist said that Jesus didn't want anything written by Jesus was also that he knew that anything that he touched would become relics as soon as Spiritism would become the Gospels. There is not a single original Gospel. Back then, the Gospels were not, you could not just go to FedEx and create copies. You couldn't go to Amazon and print. No, those were manual. Out of the apostles of Jesus, two knew how to write. Even Peter had a hard time writing because it was not something that people knew. So how people knew the law? By talking to each other, by teaching. Because a lot of people, some could read, could not write, right? Jesus, of course, could write on anything, right? A symbolism that Emmanuel brings us in one of his books is called Nos, would be we, is that Jesus left his mark in this world without writing anything, but he wrote his page in the history of this world. And we are doing that every single day. Do we want our page, our contribution to this world to be a beautiful page on that book? If we do, are we doing something for this to happen? It's the very interesting text. You know, it's on the web in Portuguese. We can find the books called Nós, we. Okay, so Jesus basically looking down or look at them and said, "Let any one of you guys that is without sin, you're gonna be the first one to cast a stone at her." How beautiful is that, right? This is a miracle. Someone that gave this example. And what happened after that? He stooped down and he started writing on the ground again. What was Jesus writing, for God's sake? That not a single apostle, you know, oh, he's writing. Let me see. That's gonna go to my diary. That's gonna go to the gospel. No, they didn't do that. I wanna know. Okay, there are several theories about what Jesus was writing. One that I heard someone here brought, very interesting. Jesus was writing the names of all those that were there. They already committed adultery with that woman. It's an interesting theory, right? Well, others said that Jesus was writing the law that they were referring to show that he knew what they were talking about. Anyway, there's no confirmation of what exactly Jesus was writing for my despair, right? And then once he started writing down, those who heard began to go away one at a time. And John, according to this Brazilian public speaker, Haroldo Dutra, he translated the gospel. He worked on the translation of the gospel from the original Greek texts into Portuguese. he says that John's gospel is very interesting for a lot of things. First, it's very poetic. A lot of things rhyme on the original languages. And it's very interesting too that he used words that sometimes have different, like 5 meanings to the same word, right? Because he wanted that teaching to evolve as the words would expand their meanings. So he makes sure to say that the older ones were the first ones to drop. The old ones first, and then, so those are the ones that are most guilty. They are old ones. They sinned much more than all the other ones. So he understood right there that Jesus was talking directly to them. So the ones that were the most guilty first. The ones that were still very guilty only second. And the ones that still didn't have time enough to even understand how guilty they were looked on the example and followed the example. And one by one, they left. And then Jesus, the teacher, the master, goes to that humiliated woman and asks her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" He knew the answer, but he wanted to be sure that she saw that and she saw the answer. Did they leave, those that were condemning her? Did they leave because of her? No, she's a sinner just like them. They left because they saw the virtue right there, the example right there. They became small in face of how big Jesus became right there. And he was so big that he even went to her and said, "That neither I condemn you." And said, "Go now and live your life of sin. Go now and sin no more." So he had the moral authority to condemn her. Would that make any good? Sometimes that's all what we need to be condemned, right? To be sentenced. So we are put on a timeout, pay our time, and then we are free to go. Our conscience is free. I already paid my debt, right? That's what we have to do several times. But Jesus gave us the example here. He did not condemn and live a life of sin. There's not a single Spiritist teaching about this woman, who that woman was, what that woman became, but it's clear here that with this example, this woman had the chance to fix her life. How many times do we want to have a chance like this? When you do something, sometimes from the beginning you know that's wrong, but we cannot avoid it. Quite simple. Eating. We know that we shouldn't be eating this or that. We're gonna get sick, but we couldn't help it. We go and we eat it, and we get sick. What about the big things? Sometimes we try to avoid, but we cannot get there. But we want to have that chance of not being condemning. Then we have the chance to better ourselves, to improve ourselves. And Jesus gave us this unforgettable lesson, right? Well, 10 million hours of flight, right? That does that to you. So, what do we have on Spiritism about that? So, on the Gospel according to Spiritism, as we develop this text, is on the item 13 of the chapter 10, Jesus shows that he makes the indulgence the first duty towards others because there's no one that's needed for themselves. We need this. So if we need, other people need that too. What will be indulgence here? And that's a problem sometimes when you're translating from French to Portuguese, from Portuguese to English. When you go back to French, the word may be a little different, right? No, but Jesus makes that you sometimes have to have empathy and put yourself on the other person's side. You don't know what that person is going through when that person did that thing that caused you to start judging that person. Okay, put yourself in that person's place. What would you do? Right? Now, put yourself on that person's place and what do you think that that person needs to get better? It's what you will need too. Second thing, about severity, right? We cannot judge others with more severity than we would be judged ourselves. The same ways, we cannot condemn others, things that we do the same thing. And finally, before blaming someone of something, let's see if that same thing could not be applied to us, right? In traffic, when we mess up in traffic, are we the only ones who, let's say, doesn't signal before changing lanes? Or we don't let someone cut in front of us when they need to change lanes? And then when we try to change lanes, they don't let us, and then we are mad at that person. Simple things. As we grow, things get bigger, especially with people that are close to us, especially if those people that we had to live with them our entire lives. Our parents, our brothers and sisters, our cousins, the people that we chose to live our lives, we get tired of certain things because we're gonna be honest with you guys, people don't change. Well, they do. It takes a few incarnations. If I expect my sister to change, my God, I'm gonna get old. No, you may make a huge effort for you to become a better person. That's why we are here. But we cannot expect others to change. We can put our effort on for us to improve ourselves, to do our inner transformation. So the same severity that you would apply to someone that you see is lazy, that you see is anything that may bother you, see if that cannot someone else could not apply that to you. That's going to help you become a better person. Instead of judging, extend a hand, lay a hand. Let's see how we can help. Again, we are not, as long as we are not infringing that person's free will, right? So, still on the chapter, we touch it's not possible that Jesus could have prohibited the overthrowing of evil, seeing that he gives examples of having done that just himself. By this part here, and there are more to support this, comes the part. What about our judiciary system? Judiciary, I cannot pronounce that, but I hope you guys know what I mean, right? Judiciary system, right? Do we need that? Are we going to do that? Are we going to make them read this and then free everybody? Again, we are not there yet. This planet is a school. It's a school of regeneration, or we are here to pay for debts, to learn to grow. As part of this, we need discipline. Let's give an example. Marcel is one that also usually likes to give this example. If you get children that are on third grade and you give them the same freedom that, let's say, someone in college has to decide which class they're going to attend or not, what do you think is going to happen? Right? Yeah, it's going to be chaos. They're not going to choose to watch any single class, right? By then, we have to push the rules, right? As we evolve, we go through middle school, get to high school. We think we know everything already, right? We are, we think we're gonna work towards our freedom. We are, we need less discipline, like the way it used to, like you don't have to get in line or to everybody dress the same way or whatever, as it was on third grade, because we already move forward. Until the point that we graduate in high school, we can even choose if we're going to study or not, going to continue studying or not. We have that choice, right? So our planet is on the stage that we are maybe what? Fifth grade, sixth grade, stuff like that, entering middle school. We are no longer as primitive as we were to the point that Moses had to threaten people of being stoned to death, or at least that's what they say, because the same Moses received the messages from Jesus or from God saying, three words, "I shall not kill," right? God didn't tell Moses, "Thou shalt not kill unless they commit adultery." No, "Thou shalt not kill," period. That's it. So again, is it strange that then you get the law where they allow to kill, or you are actually encouraged to kill? They were way too primitive yet, right? People there, they lived way less than we do. Even though they say that Moses lived 130 years, let me tell you something, they didn't know even to count the years back then. So, and by day, even worse, us. Because if we are spirits and been here for a while, we may be there too, counting wrong the years, make these mistakes, adoring a goats, right? Why not us, right? So, what we have to separate, that's one of the lessons that the Spirit brought us. When you are judging and sentencing, here our laws change. The human laws evolve. The human laws are a very bad copy of the divine laws. We will get there. But right now, we already accept that black, white, woman, and man are supposed to have the same rights. This is by the law of most of the countries, not all of them. We're gonna get there. But at least this now is law. If you think not too long ago, it was not like this, it was separated, right? So our law evolves. So if the law and the justice don't match, you have to think about the justice. And where do you learn the justice? Is in our conscience. God planted in our conscience all the laws. As we evolve, we have access to more of them. But if the spirit at this point needs to have his or her freedom taken away for a certain time, right now that's what we have so our society can exist. Because sometimes you need to teach by fear. If you go to a third grader and threaten the third grader with a timeout, or you won't have recess, you're gonna have to work on recess, that kid's gonna think twice before, throwing a piece of paper on the teacher, right? Again, we are middle schoolers. We need that fear. By our own, we are not there yet. I'm gonna tell you guys, there are places that are already there. There's a country in Central America that doesn't even have an army. If you want to invade and kill everybody, you can, but they don't spend money on that. It's called Costa Rica. Interesting, right? So the society evolves. Others, not there yet. Depending on where we are, we may need to have that restriction. Haroldo Dutra is a judge. That's his job. And the example that he gives is he tries to judge the process. Here's what the law says, and here's is the crime that was committed. Let's judge this crime. Let's judge and sentence according to what this time they think is fair for that crime that was committed. It's a very tough job for a spiritist that knows about this even more, right? So, the right to censor is to be found in the moral authority of he who censors. So, on the legal system, the judge is the one that has to give the example. So when a judge comes and says, I make mistakes, I'm a human being. Yes, we know, we all make mistakes, but you have to develop the moral authority. You cannot judge someone for a mistake for a crime that you commit yourself. If you if you intend to become a judge, if you intend to sentence someone, you have to be way past that part, even because you know the law. Same thing to us as we try to pretend that we have the right to judge someone, to censor someone. Let's see if we already have that more authority. Hours of flight. You're gonna get more hours of flight. To become guilty of the same thing that you're condemning someone is to renounce that authority. Okay, so depriving oneself the right to restrain. Remember that I talked about the question 64 on this book here, The Counselor. So here's the translation of that. In the view of the law of man, when in the presence of criminal process, should the vote be condemning in accordance with the criminal process, or should it absolve the defendant? Because Jesus told us, do not judge, right? So, Emmanuel, if Jesus has 10 billion hours of flight, Emmanuel has, quite quite a lot, much more than I do, probably, because he's already got there, right? So, Emmanuel, a quick summary of his answers. We must remember the figure of Christ with the stoned sinner, not to condemn this or that of our fellow man, and see where we can apply this. Go and sin no more. It must be our standard of conduct within the heart, moving away from the hurt of evil that thrives in it. So, very poetic. That's the way Emmanuel likes to write to us. In public proceedings, the judicial authority must know where the convenient resources for corrective or re-education of the social organism is located individually. However, so for us as a person, let us seek to learn if we can judge something, we always should judge ourselves first. So, on the legal system, the judge should give the example, should have the moral authority to do that. Individually, before we point our fingers at someone, let's do that exercise very hard, my difficult resolution for this year, because we are tempted all the time. And again, with those people that we leave the most, that we already know that the person is going to do that thing that irritates us. But baby steps, crawl, walk, run. We're going to take us, we got to get those hours of flights, right? According to that specialist, 10,000 hours. Well, we got plenty of time. That's about what, 20 years? If we do like 5 days a week, practicing something, we may get 10,000 hours of experience on something, right? So we're getting close to our final text, and I wanted to share with you guys. This book has been translated. This is a pretty good one. It's called Our Daily Bread. We have here in our group. It was written also by Chico Xavier, by the Spirit of Emmanuel. This is based on the passage where Jesus says, "Go now and live your life of sin." So it's the last thing that Jesus said on that passage for the adulterous woman. Okay, what they talk about here, I will not read one by one, but here are some examples. The young tree that you fail to shelter is open to destruction. The water that you fail to distribute becomes muddy. The fruit that is not utilized becomes spoiled. The flowers that you fail to cultivate will not rebloom. The medication whose proper dosage you do not imbibe as indicated will not benefit you physically. The same happens to the divine grace. If you do not guard the blessings from heaven, respecting them in yourself, if you do not utilize the great knowledge that you receive to benefit your own happiness, if you do not appreciate the contribution that comes down to you from the high, then the dedication of the spiritual messengers is of no value to you. In vain, our spiritual friends will try to improvise miracles of love and patience in solving your problems. In this case, our problems. Because without the adhesion of your will in regeneration process, all their procedure measures will be useless. Go now and live your life of sin. Leave, let it go. The lesson from Jesus is the lesson from Jesus is expressive and sufficient. The divine doctor, that's we like to see Jesus, provides the cure. So Jesus told that woman what to do. Jesus didn't say, uh, you sin. No, Jesus only said, from now on, don't do that. The same way as we always receive those chances. If we don't pay attention, we will stop receiving those blessings. Jesus will stop saying, sin no more. We're going to have to go back to where we going to be taught by fear. We're going to have to pay, right? The divine doctors provides the cure, but if we do not preserve it within us, no one will be able to foresee the extension and consequences of this new imbalance that will pursue us for lack of vigilance. Okay, so this is a very interesting book. Daily Bread has messages that we can, we'll always find something that is, we need to read that day. Uh, it has about 170 something chapters, 178, where we have a passage of the gospel, and then Emmanuel develops that passage. Sometimes it's only this a sentence like this: "Go and sin no more," and you got a text out of that. So we highly recommend this one. So I changed this and to go and live your life of judging, at least for this year. That's what I'm gonna start doing. That's my resolution. And I'm gonna tell. So far, I'm not doing well. It's not even February 12th, and it's hard, right? It's hard to read something and not think, you know what? I know someone that should be reading this. Let me text that. Judging, stop. Right? That applies to me. That's why that message was shown to me. When is the time for that person to see that message? That person will have access to it. Maybe we will show, but see the difference when I saw that. Oh yeah, there is this channel that has several funny videos about spiritism. So they release a new one, and then I said, "Oh, I gotta send this to my group." No, I'm gonna give the wrong message if I do that. First, they're gonna think that I'm sending to them because they're doing that, not because I think it's funny. Second, that's exactly what I would do, because I think they were exactly doing that thing that they were making fun of. I said, "No, I do the same, so let me work that on myself." Right? So we still have a little bit of time here before we close. I skipped a couple of slides here because they are a little bit, uh, they can get people talking. But in summary, is this one here. On that chapter, we were exposed to death sentence. Let's think about great figures of humanity. Moses. Does anybody know how Moses died? He was old. According to according to the Bible, he was 130 years old. He guided his people for 40 years on the desert. Imagine how hard it was, right? And he went up to the Mount Nebo. He saw the land of Canaan and poof, died. So even he didn't make it to the promised land. But no one killed him. Muhammad, do you guys know how he died? Okay, he got sick and died. Gandhi, he was old. Exactly. Uh, Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, he got old. The only one that was condemned to death was Jesus, the biggest of all of them. And he was 33 years old, according to the calculations that we have. But let's say he was young. He didn't live to be old. 33. Oh my God, we have a lot of energy, right? That's where he was killed, right? So it would be really strange if anybody that follows Jesus decides to kill other people. And this spiritism is no hypocrite. Period. Death sentence, wrong. All the Spiritist tells us, wrong. But we are not saying that we need that. No, we don't anymore. This has to be erased from our society forever. In basing this, I'm putting one of the texts called from the counselor, and we even have another text from this other book that is called A Religião dos Espíritos, the Spirit's Religion, right? Chapter 50. On that chapter 50, it says, Christians of all interpretations of the gospel and all the parts of the road attempts to the exemplification of Jesus separate the criminal from the crime. The crime has to be eradicated. The criminal is sick. As you learn to separate the sick from the disease, right? Educate your lost brother as much as you heal the sick. And here are the instructions of the spirits, the spirit of Emmanuel. Destroy once for all the sword and the clever, the withers and the gallows, the guillotine and the rifle, the electric chair and the gas chamber of the pictures of your penology, is the science of the penal system. Let us pray together, pleading with God to inspire us for the patience and mercy for each other. Because even today, in all our judgments, it will be possible to hear, in the wake of the conscience, the heavenly warning of our Divine Master, condemning to death without guilt. Whoever is without sin cast the first stone. Do we know if Jesus was condemned because he was a criminal? No, he was not a criminal. They decided to kill him. Do you guys think that story ever repeated in history? That someone that was innocent was condemned to death? Yes, to this day, in this country, that still happens. Okay? So, there are several talks out there about the translations of the Bibles. Guys, that's something extremely complex. Because if you think that a book was written 2,600 years ago, translated, there's a whole history about that. But the Hebrew language was not that rich back then. They had much fewer words than we have even in English. So some people decided to say that the correct translation of the teachings that said, of the commandment that says, thou shalt not kill, actually says, you shall not murder. Wrong. Try to go to God and justify that. Kill someone. Okay, no. I didn't kill. It was, I just helped killing that person because that person was, condemned to death. Okay, now go to God and try to explain that. God's going to come and say, I told you, you shall not kill. God, the translation was wrong. You should not murder. I didn't kill, I murdered. Try to bargain with God. You have that choice. Here on the Spiritist Center, learning from the spirits, the thing is, you shall not kill. We have multiple lives. We have multiple experiences. We'll always be wrong. We did that in the past. We will not do that anymore, whatever the circumstances are. There are teachings for us about that. So, death sentence on Spiritism is clear. Wrong. Okay? So, with this, let's go live our life of judging, especially if that is removing someone from the opportunity of living in this planet, on this incarnation, or sometimes just by missing a chance to not create an enemy, self-defense. Okay? So, thank you, everybody. I hope you guys learned something from all these teachings tonight. Okay? Thank you.